Morning. Oh, there we go. New background today. Good morning, July 25th, 2015. This is Kent Hovind in Pensacola, Florida. For those that don't know, and maybe you don't care, neither do I, but I was a high school science teacher 15 years, and for the last 25 years I've been an evangelist teaching on creation, evolution, and dinosaurs. And the goal of these little short programs here on YouTube, which is all pretty new technology to me, the goal is to strengthen your faith in the Word of God. And if you're not a Christian, I want to get you converted. I want to see everybody come to know the Lord as their personal Savior, like He became mine 46 years ago. What I have behind me here on the charts here is some stuff I used in the federal prisons when I was locked up for nearly 9 years for one of the dumbest laws in the history of humanity. And all I had to work with is paper and once in a while a magic marker. So we'll make better ones when we do PowerPoint. But I thought I would share with you today a couple of things about what the Bible teaches about how the world is going to end. According to the Bible, God made the world and it's coming to a conclusion. Yesterday we had family come visit to help us clean up around Dinosaur Adventureland. Some of the hedge trimming and tree trimming and lots of work that needs to be done. Praise God for those that have come to help. Thank you so much. And today they're coming back, actually, so I've got to get this broadcast done early this morning to try to answer some questions. By the way, if you'd like to do some radio interviews or interviews for YouTube, I've done many in the 2 weeks I've been home, and I'd be thrilled and honored to do that. You can contact Hannah. She's my volunteer part-time secretary in North Carolina, and her email is sowbountifully@mail.com. Did I get it right, Hannah? It's not Gmail, just mail. SEW bountifully, BOUNTIFULLY, at mail.com. And so if you want to schedule, I'd prefer 15-minute, short, 30-minute, maybe max, if you'd like to do some kind of interview on creation, evolution. If you know somebody who wants to debate, I'll be glad to debate them. I'm not looking for a fight, but they started it. I believe the Bible is literally true and scientifically accurate. I believe it from every detail. God made the world in 6 days. So what I did in federal prisons as they moved me all over the country 30 times, I carried rolled up my chart and folded it with my property and put it in so it's a little bit wrinkled up and beat up, and I'll make a better one, trust me. But it is pretty cool. It shows the effects of prison life. The Bible teaches very clearly that God made the world in 6 days, about 6,000 years ago. So this bottom chart shows the general overall timeline. 4000 BC, God created everything, and you get that by adding up the dates given in Genesis, and we have this chart in the back of our seminar notebook. Before the flood came, the people lived to be 900 years old, and we cover all that that's where dinosaurs lived during this time frame. They did not live millions of years ago. So we have the creation and the flood in the days of Noah, about 4,400 years ago. This is the general overall timeline. In my book that I wrote on end times called What on Earth is About to Happen, I used this basic timeline and expanded greatly to the top one, which I'll share with you in a minute. So in my book, actually, it's a little bit unusual. I guess I don't care what other people think on much of anything. So in my book is only about 6 pages long, and all the rest of the book, 250 pages, is appendixes explaining the things pointed out in those 6 pages. In those 6 pages, I give the general overall view, which I'm going to share with you now, and then the rest of the book is all greatly expanding those points. So, point 1 of the book, which is appendix number 1, is the creation. What was it like? How can we show the earth is not billions of years old? Appendix 2 of the book is all about the flood. What caused the flood? Where did the water come from? Where did it go? And what did it do while it was here? Part 3 of the book is about Daniel's visions. About 600 years before Christ, Daniel, the prophet Daniel in the Bible, lived in captivity his entire life. And the king of Babylon saw an interesting vision of a statue with a head of gold, chest of silver, belly and thighs of brass, legs of iron, and who knows how many tens of thousands of sermons have been preached on this image. So I covered Daniel's visions. This is critical to understanding the future. Because in Daniel chapters 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12, God showed Daniel all kinds of things about the future, the far distant future. Near the end of the book of Daniel said, Lord, I don't understand. I wrote what you told me, but I don't understand what it means. And God says, forget it. It's not for you. It's for later. Go to bed. So Daniel, you really have to start prophecy, studying the future with Daniel, and then you would probably go to the book of Revelation but there's a lot of details in all the other books of the Bible as well. So part 3 of the book, as appendix 3, is about Daniel's amazing prophecies. Part 4 is about what's coming very, very soon. Now, this, from part 4, 5, and 6, is greatly expanded up here on the top timeline. The next thing we're watching for is what's called the 70th week of Daniel. Let me explain. Now, this is just a rough intro to the whole picture so you can see where I'm coming from. We'll give a lot more detail, probably be a 15 or 20 hour seminar when I get done with making it all in PowerPoint and get able to get out and go preach again. But Daniel, in about 600 BC, was told by the Lord in Daniel chapter 9, verse 24, 5, 6, and 7. He said, "Your people, the Jews, have 70 weeks determined upon them." And I think everybody agrees that a week is a period of 7 years in biblical prophecy. So 77, or 490 years. 70 groups of 7 years. And in that prophecy, Daniel was told there's going to be 69 weeks until Messiah shall be cut off. And you start your prophecy, you start counting your weeks, the angel told Daniel, when they give the command to rebuild Jerusalem. Well, the command, there's actually two. There was one given to rebuild the wall, and that was to in the book of Nehemiah, chapter 2. Another one was given to Ezra to go back and rebuild the temple. Pretty close to each other, and people argue about which one do we start from. Skip the details for now and the exact dates and all that. There was a command given to rebuild the city of Jerusalem. They started their clock. 483 years later, 69 weeks, Jesus rode into Jerusalem. He wept over the city and said, "Oh, Jerusalem, if you had only known, this is, you could have known. Today's the day. I'm here. I'm the Messiah. I'm here." And they rejected him and killed him. So God stopped the clock and set the Jews aside and said, "Okay, now I'm working with the Gentiles." And so, look, if you're looking at two mountain peaks that are lined up with each other, you might not see that there's a giant valley in between. From the side, you can see, wow, there's a big valley between here. But looking from this direction, it looks like, mountain peak, mountain peak. From the Old Testament prophet's perspective, they saw Jesus coming, suffering, dying, and then becoming king of the world. They didn't see the 2,000-year interval in between, which we now know is the mystery called the church age. So this great mystery, which we're just about to come to an end to, I believe, is what the prophets could not see, couldn't recognize. But Jesus came, he suffered and died on the cross, he rose from the dead, and the Jews rejected him. And so God set them aside, and for the last 2,000 years, it's been what we call the church age. But it's about to come to a close. There's one more week left, called the 70th week of Daniel, from Daniel chapter 9, verse 27. That 70th week is what's expanded on up here. And I'm sorry, my charts are crudely made, and the atheists will have a blast with this. Oh, look at the crummy stuff. Well, look, you go to federal prison 9 years and see what kind of charts you make. So this 70th week of Daniel starts here, 70th week of Daniel, and this represents a 7-year period, which we're going to discuss in just a minute. What happens during this 7-year period, which is prophesied? And most people who talk about the end times, which is a subject called eschatology, for those that like the big words, agree that there is a 70th week. There's 1 week left. God has set the Jews aside, stopped the clock, and now he's going to start it up again, and there's 1 week left. And I think everybody agrees, it's divided into two parts. The first 3.5 years, and the second 3.5 years, half of 7, 3.5. No argument on that. Somewhere during all this, Jesus comes back and calls up his church. Angel has a trumpet, blows the trumpet, 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, and many other verses talk about that. And then there enters a time called the Day of the Lord, the 1,000-year period, the Day of the Lord. It looks like God is working on a 7,000-year calendar. You got the creation about 4,000 BC. Then you have Jesus Christ coming about 2,000 years ago. Here we have today on my little chart. And then we have a 1,000-year period called the millennium. Milli means 1,000, like a millipede or a millimeter. So there's a 1,000-year period coming. Now this 1,000-year period is up here as this yellow part called the Day of the Lord. At the scale that I made this one, for 7 years represented by this long, this would have to be 416 feet long to be 1,000 years at the same scale. So I don't want to carry a chart around 416 feet long. So this indicates I cut out a whole bunch right here, like from here to Alabama. Well, not quite. But the 416 feet would be the 1,000-year kingdom called the millennium. So that's what we have behind. I'm just going to give a rough overview today, and we'll get a whole lot more details when my brother straightens up. But he's a hunchback, so it might be a little while. Anyway, after the flood in the days of Noah, God called a man named Abraham. About 200 or 400 years after the flood, God said, Abraham, I want you to come with me. I'm going to call you, and you're going to be a special people. You're going to be the father of many nations. Your descendants, Abraham, are going to do three things for the world. They're going to bring the world the Messiah, and Jesus Christ came through the seed of Abraham. You're going to bring the world my word. It's called the oracles. And sure enough, just about every book of the Bible is written by a Jew. And so Abraham's children, the Jews, the Hebrews, brought us the Messiah. They brought us the Word of God. And he said, you're going to be a model nation. You're going to show the world how it ought to be done. I'm going to give you my laws, perfect laws, and show you how to run a country, how to run a civilization, how to run a nation. And you're going to be a model nation. And if you're good, I'm going to bless you. If you're bad, I'm going to curse you. And for most of their history, they have been bad, and God has been really clobbering them, trying to get their attention. He's not done with them yet. I do not believe in this replacement theology that the church has permanently replaced Israel. Some people do. I'm sorry, you're wrong. God is not, he's not going to break his promise to the Jews. After Abraham's descendants, children, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, his 12 children, they went down into Egypt to be slaves. And you know that you can read the whole story in the book of Genesis. They're slaves down in Egypt for nearly 400 years. And there's a little controversy about when do you start counting counting the time. Do you start when Abraham went down there and picked up Hagar, the servant girl? Forget the details for now, but they're down in Egypt for a while. Finally, they've been crying out, God, get us out of here. We're sorry, please forgive us. And God sent Moses to deliver them. Now, Moses came along in about 1440 BC, right about here. This is the time of Moses. So he's about 550 years after Abraham. Moses leads them out of Egypt. They wander around for 40 years because real men don't stop and ask directions. It took them 40 years to walk about 11 days' journey, and they ended up in the land of Canaan, which now we call the land of Israel. They had a period of time where they did not have a king over them. This is the period of time of judges, and some of the famous judges are Samson, Gideon. You can read those stories in the book of Judges. After they had judges for a while, they got sick of that and said, we want a king like everybody else. And so God reluctantly gave them King Saul. And King Saul came just maybe 1000 BC or so, a little before that. After him was King David. And after David was King Solomon. Then Solomon's son, each of those three reigned for about 40 years. And then Solomon's son, Rehoboam, was a moron, and he split the kingdom, started a civil war. And for the next couple hundred years, they really have two kingdoms you have to cover. The northern kingdom, always wicked. The southern kingdom, half the time wicked, half the time godly, depending on who was leader and ruler. And that's where the stories are found in 1st and 2nd Kings and 1st and 2nd Chronicles, right in here, this blue time frame. Finally, the northern kingdom, God got sick of them and said, you're out of here. And they got taken captive over to Syria. The southern kingdom, called Judah, about 100 years later, got hauled off to Babylon. And that's where Daniel comes in. So you got Daniel in Babylon as a slave, neutered, castrated, figure that out. And he is in Babylon serving the wicked king Nebuchadnezzar. And God gives Nebuchadnezzar a vision of the future. And he sees this strange statue with the 5 parts to it: the head of gold, the chest and arms of silver, belly and thighs of brass, the legs of iron, and the feet iron and clay. And at the end of the vision, the king sees a rock cut out of the mountain without hands, smiting the image on the feet, and the whole thing crumbles and the wind blows it away, and the rock grows to be a giant image. And Nebuchadnezzar is terrified. What does this mean? And Daniel says, well, king, God just showed you the future of the whole world, at least for your area, Babylon. Now, there have been kingdoms all over the world, the Aztec Empire, the Inca Empire, there's lots of Chinese empire. This vision and prophecy deals with Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar's kingdom, what we would call today Iraq. The first world kingdom in that area was Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, about 600 BC. After him came the Persian Empire. They conquered that region, and that's represented by the 2 arms of silver on the belly on the image. After that was Alexander the Great, who conquered that region of the world. That's the Greek Empire. Now, after that, the 2 legs of iron, and there are 2 theories about that. One theory says it's the Roman Empire, and that's what I believed and taught for 40 years because I didn't really study it out. Sorry about that. I've changed my mind. I believe it is the Muslim Empire, called the Ottoman Empire. The long legs are probably representing the Ottoman Empire. We'll get into that much more in my book, What on Earth is About to Happen. That's up on 2peter3.com. And then the feet, 10 toes, which are iron and clay mixed. And Daniel points out that iron will not stick to clay. They won't cleave together. There's going to be a very divided kingdom at the end. 10 kings are going to try to get together, and I think it's probably going to be two different sects of Muslims, the Shia and the Sunni or something like that. They work together for a common goal, but they really fight with each other internally a lot. So that's probably what this is, the 10 toes. And that's all these visions in Daniel are covered in appendix number 3 of my book on end times. Then we have Jesus Christ coming, and everything before Jesus came is called the Old Testament, and everything after Jesus came is called the New Testament. And almost exactly 3/4 of the Bible is Old Testament, and 1/4 of the Bible is New Testament. And it starts with the 4 Gospels, the life story of Jesus, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, kind of like biographies of Jesus Christ. And then you get into the book of Acts, the actions. What did the disciples do? He told them, go preach, and what did they do? Well, they went and preached, and most of them got beat up or killed for doing so. And then, of course, the next major event is the rule of the Vikings over the world, the Norwegians. And here we are today. Now, this top timeline greatly expands on all of this last 1,000 years. So we'll get into much more detail on that, but I thought I would explain why I've got such a crummy-looking graphic behind me. I thought it was pretty cool. We hung it up on every prison wall I was on, and I had Bible studies with the guys and had a wonderful time. The major events, I call this part 4 in my book, appendix number 4, and we divided it, since it represents a 7-year period, into 5 sections. 4A is the treaty. There's going to be a treaty made to let them rebuild their temple. 4B is the first 3.5 years. What happened during those first 3.5 years? Well, the temple is rebuilt. 4C is the Antichrist breaking the treaty. He's going to break his treaty and start desolating the temple. That's called the abomination of desolation, spoken of many times in the Bible, which we cover later. The last 3.5 years we call part 4D, because 4 has A, B, C, D. 4D is the last 3.5 years. That is the only part of all of this that is ever actually called the Great Tribulation. This is the time of tribulation, or the time of Jacob's trouble. Then part 4E would be the end of the 7-year period. And I used to teach that was it, the end of the world and all that, entering into the millennium. It's not quite that way. This is the time of the rapture. This is the time of tribulation, which is why my position is what the church has pretty much always been, and the majority believe today. I believe in post-tribulation rapture, but pre-wrath. Wrath is what God does to the world. Tribulation is what the world does to us. And Jesus said, in the world ye shall have tribulation. That's not the same as when God pours out his wrath on the world. This 1,000-year period at the end, which again would be 416 feet long, represents the time called the Day of the Lord. This is not the same as the Day of Christ. The Day of Christ is mentioned 7 times, and you can look it up in the Bible. It's obviously talking about the time that our Christian race is over, the time we're made perfect, the time everything is done, it's finished, we go to heaven. The first mention of the Day of Christ is 1 Corinthians chapter 1. The day of the Lord Jesus, the day of Jesus, the day of Christ. Then 1 Corinthians chapter 5, and then 2 Corinthians chapter 1. There are 3 mentions of it in the book of Philippians. So we cover all that in the book in appendix 4E, this day of Christ. It's easy to distinguish. In Matthew chapter 24, Jesus' disciples asked him, and the story is repeated in Mark 13 and Luke 21, his disciples asked him plainly, Lord, when are you coming, and what's the sign? And he answered their question. He told them about all the troubles and trials and tribulation, and in the middle of each of those passages, he talked about the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet. Oh, well, that's back here at 4C. Daniel the prophet prophesied that Antichrist is going to desolate the temple. The new temple that they're going, and they are chomping at the bit, ready to build that temple, that will be built during these first 3.5 years of this 70th week. Then they said, what's the sign? And he said, well, the sun and the moon are going to go dark. Everybody's going to notice that. And then there's going to be an earthquake, and then an angel comes down and blows a trumpet and calls up God's elect. You can read the end of that passage in Matthew 24, starting about verse 29, Mark 13, starting about verse 24, and Luke 21. And it's just clear as a bell. After the tribulation, the angel comes, blows the trumpet, and calls up anybody still alive. The sun and the moon going dark is also mentioned in Ezekiel. I've got the references all written on the chart and in my book, but I'm trying to give you the big picture here. The sun and the moon going dark is mentioned in Joel 3 times, the book of Joel, a little tiny book of Joel in the Old Testament, and it's mentioned in the book of Acts chapter 2. After on the day of Pentecost, they spoke with these other languages. Peter said to the people listening, he said, this is that which was spoken of by the prophet Joel. And he says that after the sun and the moon go dark, he says, the day of the Lord comes before, the sun and the moon go dark before the day of the Lord. Now, the other passages in Matthew, Mark, and Luke talk about after the tribulation, the sun and the moon go dark, and then Joel says the sun and the moon go dark before the day of the Lord. It says that in Joel and in Acts chapter 2. Well, this 4E on my chart is the time when the sun and the moon go dark, and the rapture takes place. This is the day of Christ. We are taken up to heaven to what's called the judgment seat of Christ. There are 2 great judgments in the Bible. This one is only for Christians, the judgment seat of Christ. Later, at the end of time, there's going to be a great white throne judgment. And that's where everything is called up. And I got them on here, great white throne judgment. And all the verses about that are here, and I'll do a better one in PowerPoint one of these days. But the great white throne judgment is for everybody, when every idle word that men shall speak shall be called into judgment. And that's talked about in Revelation chapter 20. You can read about and that's part 6 of my book. But this 1,000-year period, known as the day of the Lord, which is not the same as the day of Christ, the day of the Lord also has 5 parts to it, 5A, B, C, D, and E. 5A, the first thing that happens during this 1,000-year period is the calling or selecting of 144,000 witnesses. Not Jehovah's Witnesses, 144,000 young Jewish male virgin witnesses. They are going to be called to continue witnessing to the rest of the world, because God never leaves the world without a witness. The Christians are going to be gone now, and so these 144,000 Jews take over, and they witness to the world. Even though God's angry and He's pouring out His wrath, He's not willing that any should perish. And if you've done stupid things in your life and have made God really angry at you, He still is willing to forgive you and save you. It's not over. And even though God's angry, pouring out His wrath on the world, in wrath He will remember mercy. And anyone who call upon the name of the Lord can be saved. So don't say, well, I've sinned too bad, God can't fix me. God can love you, forgive you, and save you, and change you permanently. So during this time of wrath, some people will still be converted. It starts off with the 144,000 Jews being called. That's in Revelation chapter 7. The next 1,040 days, 1,040 days, a little less than 3 years. 2 years, 10 months, 20 days. Let's round it off to 3 years for this discussion. This is the time of wrath. You say, Hovind, where do you get this 1,040 days? Glad you asked. This was one of the keys that unlocked everything for me to change my theology. When is the Lord coming? He's coming post-trib, pre-wrath. We won't be here for the wrath of God. In Daniel chapter 8, Daniel's talking to the angel, and the guy says, hey, how long's the temple going to be desolate? The temple gets desolated, and the guy tells him, well, the temple's going to be desolated for 2,300 days. 2,300 days. Well, half of 7 years is 3.5 years, and this time period, sometimes it's called 3.5 years, sometimes it's called 1,260 days, sometimes it's called 42 months, and I've got all the references on the chart. Well, 42 months, 1,260 days, 3.5 years, or in Daniel it's called times, and the dividing of a time. I think all Bible scholars agree that 7-year period is divided into 2 equal parts of 3.5 years each. So, what's this 2,300 days? He says the temple will be desolate for 2,300 days, and that's the orange stripe on this chart. 2,300 days. We are raptured out right here. The temple is still desolate for another 1,040 days. Call it 3 years. That was the key. Like, whoa, I've been trying to squeeze all of this stuff into a 7-year period. No, the day of the Lord has 2 parts to it. And you can read all the Old Testament prophets from Isaiah to Malachi. Nearly all of them talk about the day of the Lord. I think there are over 200 references to the day of the Lord, this 1,000-year period, the millennium. Because like I said, it looks like God's working on a 7,000-year calendar where each day represents 1,000 years. We've got 6,000 years just about to come to a close now, and then 1,000-year rule of Christ coming up soon to a city near you. So this day of the Lord has 2 parts. It has a time of wrath. Sometimes you read in the book of in the Old Testament prophets, it talks about the day of the Lord is a day of vengeance, and God's going to really get upset, and He's going to do all kinds of bad things and pour out His wrath. And then it talks about the day of the Lord being a beautiful, wonderful thing. The lion lays down with the lamb, and all kinds of great things happen. Peace on earth, goodwill toward men. And people get confused. Wow, what is this day of the Lord? Well, it has 2 parts to it. The first 3 years is a time of wrath. The next 997 years is a time of great blessing and bounty, and everything's wonderful. It all falls in the day of the Lord. So this day of the Lord is divided into 2 distinct parts. The time of wrath, pretty short, and the time of blessing, pretty long, 416 feet. So I divided the day of the Lord, as called it appendix number 5 in my book, and it also has 5 parts, A, B, C, D, and E. 5A is the calling of the witnesses. 5B is the time of great wrath on planet Earth, when God really gets upset and pours out His wrath in the form of 7 trumpet judgments and 7 vial judgments. Part C, 5C, is when we return with Christ and the Battle of Armageddon takes place. There are actually 2 parts to the second coming of Christ. The first time He comes to call up His children, He only comes to the clouds. Angel blows the trumpet, we take off. The first coming, we go up to the judgment seat of Christ. Then there's the marriage supper of the Lamb. You know, one pagan king in the book of Esther had a marriage feast for 6 months. Everybody thought, wow, this guy's rich. His marriage feast lasts 6 months. Our marriage feast up here is going to last 1,040 days, nearly 3 years. After the marriage of the Lamb, then Jesus comes back on a white horse with all of His Christians with Him on white horses. Now this time He touches down on the Mount of Olives. First time He doesn't touch down, it's only to the clouds. 3 years later, it's to the Mount of Olives. And the Mount of Olives splits in half, moves north and south, and a big valley opens up, and a spring opens up under the temple, the new temple they're going to have built. Probably washing out the temple, washing out the eastern gate, washing out the cemetery, and I think filling in the whole Jordan Valley, which is way below sea level, making a huge lake and making the Dead Sea come to life, which is prophesied in one of the Old Testament prophets. Another story. So this part 5b is this time of wrath. The book of Revelation has 7 seals, 7 trumpets, and 7 vials, so STV. We are raptured out at the 6th seal. Revelation chapter 6 and verse 12. The sun and the moon go dark when the 6th seal is broken. Bingo, that matches with Matthew 24, Mark 13, Luke 21. That's the rapture. We're taken out when the 6th seal is broken. So we are not here when the wrath of God falls on the world, which is the 7 vial judgments, 7 trumpet and vial judgments. But if you read Revelation chapter 6, the first 11 verses, the famine, the pestilence, we're going to be here for that, folks. I'm convinced of that. And we'll take more questions on that later, I'm sure, as time goes along. But part 5C of my book, of the series sequence here, is the return of Christ with us, coming back, if you're saved, coming back with Him. There will be the great battle of Armageddon in the valley of Megiddo. If you look at northern Israel, there's a valley from pretty much the Sea of Galilee over to Mount Carmel, and that's called the Valley of Megiddo. When Napoleon came through there, this huge valley, he said, wow, all the armies of the world could fight in this valley. And they will, pretty much. There's going to be a giant battle there. And so many people are going to be killed that the blood's going to be up to the horse's bridle for 200 miles. That's all talked about in the prophecies. So this time of wrath, 1,040 days, is arrived at, the 1,040-day number is arrived at 2,300 minus 1,260. The time of desolation of the temple overlaps the 3.5 years. And that was like click, 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 got it. Whoa, man, how did I miss this? 5D A, B, C, D, is the 997 years of great blessing on the planet, when everything's going to be wonderful. Now, not everybody gets that. That's called the kingdom on earth. There's a heavenly kingdom, which you're promised, and if you're saved, you're going to get that. That's secure. You cannot lose that. But that kingdom on earth, that 1,000 years into this 1,000 years, that is something that to be won or lost. And Christians may or may not get that, depending upon their works. That's the prize of the high calling of God in Christ Jesus. So 5D is that 1,000-year period. 5E is when Satan is loosed out of that pit. At the Battle of Armageddon, Satan's cast into the pit for 1,000 years, Revelation chapter 20. Then he's let back out. One final battle. Not a lot in the Bible about that final battle, but that happens at the end in 5E. And I think God's going to demonstrate to the world, look, this guy had 1,000 years to repent in prison, and he didn't. I'm just going to show everybody that God is just and fair, and this guy didn't ever get it. And so then he's cast into the lake of fire, which is different than hell. All through history in the Bible, it talks about people who are not Christians, who are not saved, who don't know the Lord, are not forgiven. They go to hell. Now, hell is a temporary place. It's only going to last about 6,000 years. Then, after the judgment, people go to the lake of fire. That lake of fire comes after the final judgment. Sort of like if a person commits a crime, they're arrested, they go to jail to await trial. After trial, they're sent to prison. Prison and jail are not the same. Jail is for temporary holding until judgment. After judgment, it's prison for permanent long-term holding. So most of history so far has been people going to hell after this judgment, great white throne judgment. Then they either go to eternal heaven or to the lake of fire. Same thing up here. Sorry, my charts kind of curl up. I got them stuck up with a yardstick to hold them out. I'll do better later. So 5E is the release of Satan and the final battle, and when Satan is cast into the lake of fire. Part 6 of my book is about the great white throne judgment. What does the Bible say about that? What can we expect? What's coming? What's God going to judge us for? How do you get out of that? Well, the blood of Jesus Christ is the only way to get out of that mess. After that, you go to heaven or hell. And so part 7 of the book is, okay, in light of this, what should I do? What do you want me to do, God? What should we be doing? The world is falling apart. We're headed for real problems on planet Earth. The economy, people are predicting it's going to crash this fall. I don't know. I don't know when it's going to happen, but everybody can see we have a very inflated economy with paper money that you could use for wallpaper in the very near future. Like if you had $10 billion in Civil War currency right now, you could wallpaper your house. It is useless. Nobody at the store is going to take it to buy a gallon of milk. So that's what's going to happen to our inflated currency too. So what should Christians do? Well, exactly what Jesus told us to do 2,000 years ago. And we cover all that in part 7 of the book, What on Earth is About to Happen? Right now it's only available on lulu.com as an e-book. There were, I think, 5 paper copies printed just to be able to, different people to do editing kind of things, and I have one of them here. And so we hope to get it out one of these days when my brother straightens up, if that ever happens. Anyway, hope that helps, folks. That's a general overview, the basic picture. What in the world is happening? God created the world. He owns it. He made it. It's His. He can make any rules He wants, and He made the rules. He said, do this, don't do this. He made those rules. He destroyed the world in that big flood in the days of Noah. It's His world. He can wreck it if He wants. And even in His judgment here, He remembered mercy and saved Noah and the family. Probably took him 100 years to build that boat, and everybody in the world knew about crazy Noah building that thing, and anybody could have gotten on that boat. God provided a way through His judgment, the flood. And Jesus Christ is the only way to get through this coming judgment. If you have Jesus Christ as your Lord and your Savior, you've been forgiven, the judgment of God, the wrath of God will not fall on you. 1 Thessalonians 1:10 and 5:9, we are not appointed unto wrath. We will get tribulation. And that's the only way I can make it all fit. So we'll get all that together in the book. But if you're listening to this program today and you're not sure you're going to heaven, what if you died today? I hope you don't, but you might. I might too. Where are you going? You're going to be dead for an extremely long time. I mean, you might want to pack for that trip. You know, you're going to be gone for a while. Where are you going? And this is where, February 9th, 1969, my friend said, Kent, if you died today, where would you go? I said, I don't know. He said, well, have you ever sinned? Have you ever broken any of God's laws? Are you a sinner? I said, yeah. He said, well, then you're going to hell. I said, well, I don't want to go to hell. He said, Jesus died on the cross. His blood will pay for your sin if you'll accept his payment. I said, I'd like that. And so by faith, I believed that Jesus died for me, rose from the dead, and Jesus moved into my heart and my life, February 9th, 1969. It's like planting a seed. You plant a seed in the dirt. The dirt is 100% stupid. Dirt knows absolutely nothing. The seed knows how to make the tree. But the seed can't do its job unless the dirt will accept it. So you open up the dirt, drop the seed in, add a little water, and the tree grows. I'm the dirt. Jesus is the seed. I invited him in, and something started growing inside 46 years ago. Like, wow, what is going on in there? And he'll do the same for you. You just invite him to come in. Jesus, I'm a sinner. Would you forgive me and save me? And that simple act of faith, it wasn't the prayer that saves you. It's God's answer to the prayer that saves you. You can have a tape recorder pray a prayer. Does God answer the prayer is the secret. You just are the dirt. Say, Lord, I'm nothing. I'm a sinner. I'm wicked. I'm vile. Forgive me and save me. And his blood was put onto my account. And I'm forgiven. So when I stand before God at that great white throne judgment, he's going to open the books and say, Kent Hovind. And all the atheists are going to be, wow, he's going to get his now. Now we're going to find out what that guy was really like. And the angel's going to say, the book's clear, Lord, nothing here. Hovind, come on in. And the skeptics and scoffers and Hovind haters are going, what do you mean? He's a liar, he's a thief, he stole money, he didn't pay his taxes. They're going to have their long list. Angel's going to say, shut up. I said the book's clear. Come in. My sins are gone. I mean, like, gone. And that's amazing. Matthew 1, 2, 3, 4. Matthew 12, 34, 5, and 6. Talk about every idle word that men shall speak. They shall give account thereof in the day of judgment. God has a record of everything you've ever said, everything you ever thought, and everything you ever did. And if you don't want that record read out loud in front of everybody who ever lived, you better get on your knees and call out for Jesus to save you. That's the only way to get that record clean. Mine's gone. I'd love to stand next to you up there in heaven, and God says, calls your name, says, record clear, come on in. He will clear it out. It's wonderful. It's not that I've never sinned. It's that it's paid for by Jesus Christ. So this is kind of the big picture of history, and I thought about just turning my chalkboard around, having my regular charts, and doing a broadcast, because I have about 4,000 questions to answer that have been sent in. I said, well, the backside of these things, they showed on the other side, sticking out past my other chart. And I thought, well, somebody's going to say, what's that thing sticking out? That's what it is, my paper chart. We'll work on that later on. Please, if you've not accepted Christ, do so today. And let me know. I'm sorry, I'm so far behind on emails and phone calls and all that. I'm trying, okay? But if you want to leave a quick message, Hannah is such a blessing to me. She's just a young lady in North Carolina that wants to help do volunteer secretarial work. Get a hold of her. It's so bountifully at mail.com. And tell her, hey, I got saved. I gave my heart to the Lord. That's the purpose of my ministry, my existence in life, is not to make money. It's not to get rich. It's to get people into the kingdom. Everything here is going to burn. Everything you work for all of your life is going to burn too. Don't do that. Invest it in the heavenly kingdom. Hope that helps. Thank you so much.